Yo ho ho, and might I add a bottle of rum into the equation. Jay here with Nerd Rage Against the Machine, and today we're going to be talking about Kings of War Armada by Mantic Games. So, full disclosure, I didn't pay for this. However, also Mantic did not send me a copy. This is not a comp game or a comp copy of a game. This was actually my Christmas gift from my loving wife. So, thanks, dear. I really do actually enjoy this game, which is kind of why I'm doing this review. So, a little backstory. Mantic Games, Kings of War specifically, is a fantasy war game very much in vein of Warhammer Fantasy Battles. In fact, I would describe it as an analogy of it is to Warhammer Fantasy Battles what Pathfinder was to D&D. It was designed to be a point of, hey, if you really dislike Games Workshop going to Age of Sigmar or whatever Games Workshop has done this week, we have a great rule set that's very reminiscent that you can use. Now, early on, I know a lot of people dumped on the miniatures. The miniatures were terrible. I thought they were okay, but I totally get it too. But to that end, Mantic was very cool about you using your old Fantasy Battles armies too. So if you had, boxes and boxes of a Dwarven army or an Orc army, you were pretty well set. I mean, you weren't forced to buy into their models to play their game, which is really actually pretty cool. The game itself is also very simple, very well done, and it's also full of some charms of its own. I love the Dwarven throwing Mastiffs as an example. It's just such a funky little idea that Dwarves have these big dogs, like, Mastiffs, that they can literally grab by a handle on their back, like a harness, and throw at their opponents, and then watch the dogs go nuts. It's those kind of things that are just kind of fun. So saying that, I've also got a bit of a yen for naval games. I do enjoy them. Victory at Sea is a good one, in my opinion. And I looked heavily at Warlord Games' Black Sails. I picked up a copy, and I immediately sold the copy because those ships were just insane. Now, again, I have nothing against Napoleonic warfare. I have nothing against Napoleonic naval warfare. But when you have to put on the little paper sails and then string them, it was too much for me. I mean, and I'm not a hobby novice by any stretch. I'm not the guy who, shies away from modeling. Not by a long shot, but that was my bridge too far. So when I got this, I didn't realize initially, but it is actually based on the same rules as Black Sea. So I got a chance to kind of sample those rules with a definitely more fantasy flavor. Whereas, again, if Black Sails was meant to be a true Napoleonic naval war game, this is the same rules, but then loosened up for a fantasy audience. And honestly, it works really well. Basically, you have, just like with most of these kind of games, you have the different factions, and these ones are pretty much your bog standard ones. So these are the Basileans. The Basileans are basically your humans with a very angelic religious bent. Good humans, if you will. There's also the Empire of Man, which I don't think they have ships for yet, but they're more just average humans. You have your orcs, you have your dwarves, you have your elves, you have the Empire of Dust, which is your zombie mummy type armies, and then you also have like the Twilight Kin, which are your dark elves. So they're going some different ways with this, and I think that's cool as well. Each ship has a few stats to go off of. Very simply, it's you have a movement, you have a nerve and a structure points, as well as a crew effectiveness for warfare. But the game runs in turns. Now, one of the coolest things I think is actually the initiative system. And initiative is one of those things that's always hard to get right. A lot of games will default to what the typical you go, I go, which I get. I totally get it. but you can also get too cumbersome. This one uses something very odd but very cool, which is that you at the beginning of every scenario you set the wind, and then at the end of every turn or the beginning of the next turn you roll to see if the wind changes. And what that does is the wind is either going to go north, east, or north, south, east, west, or a corner. You put a token where the wind goes, and then you just draw an imaginary line going outward. The first ship to hit that line is the first ship to go. And what this does is it means that you never have complete control over initiative, which is great. But at the same time, it's not too complex. It's not too crazy. Before you set initiative, you also do want to set your speed. Each vessel has a movement rate, and with that movement rate, you will determine if you're going to go to like drop anchor, which is no movement, up to full steam ahead, which is 3 movements of that type. So, for example, this ship here is the Hammerfist has a 5-inch movement. So you would again just set it and move it to 5 inches. Now, the one thing about this is, unlike most miniatures games, you have to move the full amount, which makes sense because you don't have the kind of control in a wind-controlled vessel like you would, say, in a mech or in an infantry unit. Each token also has, or each ship or card even shows you which of these 2 sides you use to turn. And again, the turn is a little more of a, you can do some of it or all of it, depending. The other fun thing about the game is, again, as expected, these ships are going to have cannons. The game uses colored dice to determine the types of cannons to speed up the volley of warfare. So, for example, if you have 2 light cannons and 2 close quarters cannons, you would roll as thusly. Mostly it's a 6 or better to hit. There are some sub-rules that will change that, but nothing too drastic. Now, as far as collisions go, you are not allowed to collide. And if 2 ships ever get close enough to where they will collide, you will each roll a crew quality check, which is basically a d6 4 or better. As long as one of you succeeds, you miss each other. Now, there are also special rules for each race, and this is where the game goes into fantasy versus the more historical Black Sails kind of thing. So first off, orcs, on the other hand, can also always opt to ram. While ships are not supposed to ram, orcs be orcs. I mean, look at this thing. It has a massive, I don't know if you can see it from this part of the camera, but it has a this huge spinning set of fists on the front of it. These are not realistic vessels, but then again, it is part of the charm of this game, is the idea of this kind of fantasy navies and that kind of warfare. The other big thing, of course, is if you almost hit an island, the island, of course, can't try to avoid, which makes perfect sense. All in all, and there are several great tutorials online already, so I don't really want to go too crazy into the rules. Trust me, if you're interested in the game, I would recommend them. These models are pretty easy to put together compared to Black Seas. They are all resin, so you want to wash them first, and then it's basically a little bit of super glue and figuring out. The one thing I would say that kind of annoyed me as a newbie into this game is I really wish they would have at least put like a little sheet to show you how these ships assembled. So I mean, I had a little trouble just figuring out like what goes with what and trying to fit pieces together and test fit pieces till I found what worked. But again, once I figured that out, they were pretty simple. They have an MDF base, which again, each ship goes on that, which is for the templates and the use of measurement. All works. Your firing arcs are template based, except for your sides are always just an imaginary line between the front and back of the ship. So that base is definitely an important part of the game. And what's more, if you're interested in trying the game, Mantic does offer a free 6-page version of the rules to give you kind of a test. Which, again, that's something they've done even with their Kings of War games, which I really like. They're a pretty cool company, I think, in that respect. They're very open to you trying things first, which try before you buy, I think, is always a good idea. It wouldn't be that hard to get some old Pirates of the Spanish Main card ships and glue them to cardboard bases at the same size and at least give this a go with some proxies and see if it's worth it. The game itself runs about 125 retail, but again, there's places like Amazon and Miniatures Market and like where you can get it cheaper, I'm sure. The fleets tend to be about 55 for 3 big ships. The game itself actually comes with 4 ships. Yeah, I'm lazy. I haven't painted the fourth ship. And the fourth ships, in both these cases, it's two of these big guys here. The Hammer Fist and the Illoi are your two biggest points heavy ships and the biggest ships in this box set. So you get two of these, two of the smaller ship, two of the medium ships, and then two of the smallest ships. We played this through the other night. My friend Dave and I went and tried this game out, and I got my butt absolutely handed to me. I was playing orcs, and I was able to initiate a boarding action on his Illoi, actually, and I was enjoying that until his little mortar ship here, the bombardier, whatever, was able to just basically sail around me and just dropping bombs every chance he got, which was totally understandable. Saying that, I literally got my butt handed to me hard, and I still want to play again. So that I think is a pretty good example of how good this game is. It's not something where, you know, it sucks because I didn't win. No, it's a really great game, and I think that they did a lot of good work on it. I'm actually thinking at this point about picking up a Dwarven fleet, maybe an Elven fleet to expand on it. But really, I think it's worth trying, worth a shot. And if nothing else, you can check out those YouTube videos that show you how to play and that 6-page rule set. The only other thing I'm going to say that is a massive gripe, and this is also true with other games. Warlord Games' Victory at Sea also ticked me off with this, is there is, at the back of the book, there is a nice set of charts that show you all the things that you need to know how to play the game in easy reference, yet that is not available online. And that just blows my mind. It's like, guys, this is one of the easiest things. Just put, you don't have to print a bunch of these and put them in the box. We're not asking for printing costs. But if you could put those 2 pages into a single PDF online where players who have bought the game can download multiple copies and hand one to each player, it makes game 100 times easier. And I don't know why they didn't do it. I don't know why Warlord Games didn't do it for Victory at Sea. Get on it, guys. Otherwise, though, no, this is a great game. It is definitely worth an investment, especially if you like naval war games and fantasy. I'm already planning at this point that it's going to end up getting incorporated into a bigger campaign of some kind, just because I do enjoy the rules, and I'm getting ready to print some 3D terrain so I can have islands and fortresses and things to make this game really sing. But definitely, I think, well worth it, in the spirit of Man of War, but a very different rule set. So if you like naval wargaming and fantasy naval wargaming, honestly, I think this one is a keeper. Saying that, I can just say I bid you adieu and happy gaming.